believers, and welcome to the show. This is a podcast about creative people and how they navigate their lives whilst being in the thrall of TV's greatest enchantress, the X-Files. I'm outside a military base in an undisclosed location for today's episode. Closest I've been to the military before that is a long and illustrious career in the scouting movement. Yes, indeed, I was one of North East Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire's representatives to attend the 19th World Scout Jamboree in Chile. Don't remember too much about the camp itself, other than a couple of lines from the handbook which we were given at the beginning of camp. In there was a section devoted to best practices and behaviours, and one of those said, "The 19th World Scout Jamboree is a place for friendship and goodwill, but should not be seen as an opportunity to engage in chance love affairs." Words I think we can probably all live by. Yes, wash your mouth out and salute the Queen. Anyway, I hope you're well, and thank you for your service in listening to this podcast. Not going to waffle on, so let's talk about today's guest. It's a scientist and magician, Kevin Quantum. Kevin's first foray into TV was in the mid-2000s on the popular reality show Faking It, in which someone is trained to do a job which is laterally opposed to the one they already do. On that show, Kevin, a scientist at the time, trained to be a magician. Since that point on, you may have also seen him on Britain's Got Talent, being labelled as a sexy Doctor Who by Simon Cowell, or at one of his many brilliant magic shows across Scotland, the UK and internationally. In 2005, his 90-minute Easter Day special was watched by almost 7 million people across the UK. In addition to all this, he was flown over to Las Vegas and received a masterclass on magic from Penn Teller. He now runs his own magic masterclasses in and around Scotland and runs the Edinburgh International Magic Festival. In today's chat, Kevin talks about finding his voice on stage, Faking It, the TV show we mentioned, Britain's Got Talent, ghostly campsites, The Masked Magician, remember that, with Mitch Pileggi, and we get to speaking about The X-Files Season 2, Episode 15, Fresh Bones, in which Mulder and Scully discover a voodoo symbol drawn on a tree after a soldier crashes into it, following 2 separate hallucinatory incidents. Really enjoyed speaking to Kevin. I love magic, absolutely love it, and absolutely fascinated by people involved in that world, so it's great to hear a little bit about it. Did not get a chance to chat to him about the time I saw the magician David Copperfield perform in Las Vegas, but that's a story for another time. Anyway, if you're in Edinburgh this festive period, and even if you're not, do please check out the Edinburgh International Magic Festival website. The festival runs from the 17th to the 30th of December, and there's loads of great shows on across that. As always, if you like our show, please do leave me a message, subscribe, review, follow us on X, still there, Instagram, YouTube, Threads, TikTok, kicking off on TikTok. In the meantime, in the words of Steve Miller and his band, Abra, Abra, Cadabra. Here's Kevin.
Without getting too deep into it, I go between feeling really optimistic about the future and then just completely overwhelmed with stuff.
Right.
So that's, but generally speaking, the trend is upwards and feeling good. I think optimistic. Few things that are to look forward to next month: the Christmas shows and Australia tour happening next year. So yeah, feeling good. Just like lots to do, of course, which is always the thing. Just not enough time to get everything done, but always feel incredibly lucky to be in this job and be doing what I'm doing.
Yeah, is that when you say sometimes you're feeling slightly down about the future, is that, do you mean about the sort of magic industry in general, or were your part in it?
Because I've got a family and kids, it's like, oh my God, how am I going to give them the things that they need, you know, like how can I make sure you've got enough money for all the activities they want to do, and like, oh no, or this project didn't work out, that's the end of the world, or I didn't get that particular thing I was pitching for, or what, just weird things recently. Like, you know, when so like, I don't want to get into too much details, but I got like a legal letter through the post recently. And I've had them once or twice. Like one time I had the title of a show which I didn't realize was trademarked, and I had this show called Neon Future, and it turns out this American DJ had also trademarked this show, and he was just threatening me with you can't use this show name, and then he ultimately the offer was like, stop using it or we'll sue you, and I was all right, I'll stop using it. And so it was, but there's something like that came through a few days ago, and it's fine, it's okay. You know, all these, you when you open the envelope, it gets blown up in your head, but then you have a few days to digest it, and you're like, it's actually not that bad.
Yeah, get on with it.
Yeah, so that's like a long answer. I guess everyone has it. You know, it's just there's always ups and downs, but generally speaking, I'm pretty optimistic. Coming into a really good patch of form with my live shows, and lots of stuff in the calendar to look forward to.
And how's the Magic Festival shaping up this year?
Yeah, it's a big part of my year. So kind of split between performing and organising, and the organising element is in the shape of this thing called the Edinburgh International Magic Festival that I put on in Edinburgh every year, and that's a big part of my life right now. A lot of that is, what should it look like? What's the main image going to look like? Putting the program together, inviting other magicians to Edinburgh to take part in the program. There's always like some kind of new elements to it that need a bit more thought. Or there's we do a bunch of outreach stuff. Sometimes it's like helping kids get into magic, giving them opportunities to learn, or working with charities like we're doing this year with Edinburgh Young Carers and doing an illusion exhibition, pulling all that together. There's all this stuff going on behind the scenes that like you're always like, I always underestimate how much time it's going to take me to do it. It's always just like, oh my god, taking on too much again.
Yeah, and are you you're doing a show in Fife, is that right? Because that's where you're from, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm from Fife. Yeah, it's a small town called Rosyth. But our local big town was called Dunfermline, and there's a wonderful hall there called Carnegie Hall, which is the hall I used to go to as a kid to watch pantomimes. And this is our opportunity to put my own Christmas show on in this wonderful theatre, and can't wait to do it. So it's the first time we've taken the Magic Festival shows outside of the capital, outside of Edinburgh. And so I actually just was talking to one of the artists, an illusion act in that show, just to try and work out the logistics behind what we're going to do for the show. So it's an exciting new partnership with this illusionist based in Glasgow.
Where did you first see and become aware of magic? And I guess just to follow on from that, who were you watching growing up? Was there always magic in the house? Was there always an interest in magic in the house, or was it something you came to later in life?
So when I was a kid growing up, yes, there was TV, and there was Paul Daniels on television, the Paul Daniels Magic Show. Paul Daniels is sadly no longer with us. This old great British magician, very successful. Him and his beautiful assistant, the lovely Debbie McGee.
Lovely Debbie McGee.
Come dancing a few years ago. And so he was on TV, but he also had this, he was also selling magic kits, and I got a Paul Daniels magic set for Christmas. Excitement levels obviously through the roof. Learning how to do magic, and I'd only ever read it in books before. Didn't have YouTube when I was growing up, so it was only reading it in books and then seeing it in Paul Daniels magic set. So I still remember trying to do a magic show for my my younger brother and my two younger sisters, and like some friends we had over for lunch or whatever, like a play date. But it never really went much further than that. You know, being a kid magician is a bit of a cliche. It's still, I think almost every kid in the world goes through this phase of loving magic, you know?
Yeah.
But then I got into it properly when I was 24, and I was early 20s. I was on a reality television show. I was midway through my physics PhD at the time, but then I had the chance to go on this TV show called Faking It.
Yeah.
Which was a Channel 4 reality show. You had to learn a new skill in 4 weeks, and I had to learn how to be a magician.
I mean, the only section I could find of that show, I think you've obviously still got access to it, but the only section I could find online was basically the panel just being really mean to you. Like you were doing a trick, and then there was someone else who was like made a remark. There's another Scottish guy, and he was like, such a mean comment. I was like, come on, leave him, leave off. But I imagine it was like such an interesting and fantastic experience to kind of go through that. What I'm interested in as well is where you sort of went after that as well, and how you kind of came out of that, and what happened between then and Britain's Got Talent, because that was obviously another incredible part of your career to date. Was that a big period between those 2 points?
So yeah, this TV show. So firstly, yeah, that comment, that was an old magician called Patrick Page, an old Scottish Dundonian magician who was. There's always a panel of mentors, they called them, to teach you how to do magic, and he was one of them. And I know, are we allowed to swear on this podcast?
Yeah, do it. Yeah.
Yeah. So he said his comment. He watched me do a show on stage, and he goes, "Kevin, you're from Scotland. I'm from Scotland. We've got a word to describe what you've just shown me there, and that word is shite." Right? That was his critique of my performance, which kind of definitely took me aback. But just to sort of say that was his style. You know, his style of teaching and mentoring was this complete honesty. This let's just acknowledge exactly where you are right now, so then we can plan our vision of the future. And I really benefited from that. I know it was maybe quite the school of hard knocks, I guess you'd call it these days, but I really appreciate when people are honest with me, and then I feel like you can get to the end quickly. So just thought I'd say that. But yeah, post faking it, you know, I'd been on this massive high. I'd been trained by Penn Teller. I'd fooled Paul Daniels on this show, and then suddenly you're kind of left to your own devices, and that's quite a hard come down, let's say, from this where you're the center of the universe in this TV show, to trying to figure things out kind of by yourself. You're not entirely by yourself. I had help, but there was a good 5 years of upskilling where, to be honest, a lot of that time when I should have been upskilling, I was actually watching a lot of TV shows, Star Trek Voyager. I was like, Sky TV at the time, and I was like, my routine was kind of like Next Generation, Star Trek Voyager, check some emails. What else is on? Maybe a couple of X-Files episodes in there. Whatever was on television, that was my Dragon's Den. I used to quite like as well. Used to sort of throw myself into those things. So there was a bit of time where maybe I could have been a bit more productive, let's say, but I'd kind of worked out a system where I could make a really decent living from doing close-up magic at weddings and private parties.
Right.
Spend like a couple of days performing, but really only spend maybe an hour a day actually getting gigs. You know, Google Ads had come onto the scene. I was pretty dab hand technologically. I was doing Google. I was killing it on Google. Search engine optimization. KevinMcMahonMagic.com, and I was getting all these inquiries and gigs, and I was learning. I was quite a likable person, so I didn't have to be that good at magic because I had such a likable persona. And so for very little time, I was making quite a decent living, and that was the first phase of my life. And I think what happened then is I'm paying for that lack of grafting now, where I work all hours God sends on my passion. Things have totally flipped 360.
Because I was going to ask the sort of preparation period, and you know, how is there much of a kind of, because my background's in sort of stand-up comedy as well, and in doing gigs, and to a certain extent with stand-up comedy, you can only get better at stand-up comedy by doing it, you know, in front of a crowd. So 100%. Is there much of a kind of grassroots magic scene where you can go to open mic magic nights or that sort of thing, or like you say, doing that at weddings, you know, being a jobbing magician, did that help to a certain degree?
With the Faking It show, I'd been given an introduction onto the stage, and part of the training process with Faking It was, to get me up to a level where I could go on stage comfortably. We went to comedy. The final week of the 4 weeks was in comedy clubs. I was doing 3 comedy clubs a night. So by the time the final test came, in a very short space of time, I'd done over 20 open mic spots at various comedy clubs around London. We packed them in.
Yeah.
I didn't show this on the TV because you kind of want that almost instant transformation, but you don't see that in a week I'd done all over London at spot, afternoon, evening, restaurants.
Right.
It was a whole shebang of trying to get this act up to speed. And like the same thing's true with magic. Yeah, the more you do it, the better you get at it. So doing those close-up magic gigs when I first started out, I was doing TGI Fridays these are 3-hour gigs. You're working from 7 till 10. And in that time, you're probably doing about 20 to 30 2, 3, 4, 5 minute performances, and you're doing it over and over again. Now the audience is only 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people, at a table, but in that 3-hour period you're doing like 20 shows, and then you're doing that 2 or 3 times a week. So at the end of the week you've done 60 shows, right, of this close-up magic material. So you can imagine after a few years of doing that, you're really good at it. You can, close-up magicians get really good at close-up magic because they've done it so many times, right? That's how it works with close-up magic. So imagine you go to a comedy club, and rather than just doing your 5-minute spot, you're doing your 5-minute spot 20 times in a night. That's kind of what it's like with close-up magic. So close-up magicians get really good, but they get really good at performing to small audiences. All right. And there's a different skill set there between doing a table of 4 or 5 people and then going on stage in front of 40, 50 people at the local clubs in Edinburgh, like the Stand or Monkey Barrel or something like that. That's a different skill set. So for the first few years of my magic life, I was really good at close-up magic, but I hadn't really explored this stand-up side of my persona. That came later. So that's so how do you get good? So if you're a comedy magician, you go to comedy clubs as well. You just do comedy clubs, you do festivals, you go to the Fringe, you work your ass off. The only way to get better at comedy, at magic, in the arts and is to do it. And like my advice to any young up and coming magician, comedian, whatever, is do it as much as you can, and then do it more than that, as much as you can, over and over and over and over again. Any opportunity you get, take it, because the more you do it, the better you get at it, and then you reap the rewards later.
During that period, did your performance style change at all? Because where you are now seems a very sort of defined on stage, a very defined character. I could say Kevin Quantum to people, and they immediately conjure, what you look like on stage, how you are on stage, how you are with people on stage. Did that change? Was there ever a period where there was going to be sort of, you were going to come out in like black eyeliner and look like you're in the Matrix or something?
That day still might come. The more the older I get, the more definitely the more product I'm using. I find myself like running mascara through my beard now to get rid of my greys and things.
Oh yeah, we've all been there.
So that aside, the persona that I've got on stage now is simply an amplified version of who I am in real life. It's overconfident, very much loving to be the center of attention, playful, vulnerable. There is an excited, a giddiness to share my inventions with the audience, but there's also this sort of fear, this risk-taking fear. What if it goes wrong? What if it doesn't work? That always exists in my act, because I always like to put stuff on stage that's challenging, not just for me as a performer, but the thing that has to do the thing has to work, and it's just there might be something that happens and it doesn't work. So I would say only like pre-COVID, I was just coming into it. I was just working it out. I'd done a few kind of things where I was really enjoying my on-stage persona, and I was fusing this kind of comedy club Kevin with this Kevin Quantum character, this sort of risk-taking scientist adventurer character, and I was kind of realizing that they were a lot closer together than I originally thought. And it's only been really post-COVID since AD and BC. I don't know if we should do like before COVID and after COVID, annual COVID, before COVID. I think it's post COVID where I found this lovely thing where I can take all this quirky, sciencey, adventurous stuff and fuse that with the comedic, excitable, vulnerable persona that is me, that's Kevin McMahon, let's just say, and bring them together. And I've been having so much success and fun with that recently. Genuinely, I've been on a run of form now for the last year and a half, where I've worked out so many things. I've just, if you're as a persona, like sometimes you go on stage and you have a great show, and other times you have a shit show, and you're like, what was the difference? Like, I just don't know what it was. I did this, and I've worked out now one of the key things, which has moved the dial for me to having a successful show up by double-digit percentage points. I've worked it out, and it's taken me 2 decades. I didn't know what it was, but now I think I've worked out one of those massive things which makes me have a good show. And it took me 20 years to work it out, and I've only worked out in the last year and a half, and it's nuts. It's taken me so long.
I was going to ask, you mentioned COVID there. Since you've been performing, have you noticed much of a change in the magic industry at all? I mean, are there more gigs now? Are there more young people getting into it? Has there been much change that you've seen?
For me, it's about the same.
Right.
So I feel like my last show before COVID, I see my own. I've sort of upped my game in a massive way post COVID. I think just the year and a half of just not being able to do anything really hit me quite hard, and realized how lucky I was. I'd been given this gift to have a career in performance in the arts and entertainment, and I felt like I'd not been giving it enough. So post COVID, I've been working my ass off, just trying to make things happen and getting really proactive. So there's that, but also combined with my biggest Edinburgh Fringe shows have been post COVID. My biggest Adelaide Fringe audiences have been post COVID. So from that point of view, I think if you look at the figures for the Edinburgh Fringe, which is a really good litmus test for theatre going audiences around the UK, maybe not, but I think it's almost back to what it was pre-COVID levels.
Yeah.
I think this year was about the same as the last year pre-COVID. So the recovery's on the way. The big shift anecdotally that I see in the sort of corporate and private arena is that remote working is here to stay, and there's less of these get-togethers for people for company events or whatnot and works nights. I think there's less of those. And when they do happen, they really want to make the most of it. So I think people they're less likely to want to go out for post-work drinks. But when they do have an event, they really want to try and make it special and give their employees something to enjoy. But yeah, when was the last time you were in a comedy club?
At the Fringe, I think, and I go to Monkey Barrel quite a lot. But yeah, I guess Monkey Barrel is that's a really great success story,
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? What those guys have done is phenomenal. It was my wife and I. We did our date night at the Stand for Halloween. That was the last time I was in a comedy club, and it was busy. It was full. The acts were fantastic. I think I've just been a while since I've just sat in a comedy club as an audience member. If you're listening to this, get your ass out of the house, go and watch some live entertainment, go to the comedy clubs, because there are some amazing acts right now, in Edinburgh particularly. And I was watching a masterclass of comparing them, watching him perform. I meant to actually reach out to him afterwards just to say how much I loved it. Because that's another thing. If you do go to something and you like it, message the person on Facebook, Insta, whatever, TikTok. Let them know how much you enjoyed watching them, because that can lift a comedian's and artist's spirits for an entire week, a month. One message from an audience member saying you were amazing. That can make someone's month. So do it. Whenever you love something, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with people. Share it with the artists, because they love hearing about it. So I think Edinburgh maybe is a bit of in a bubble because I've done a UK tour this year and I felt around the UK, especially when you go to smaller towns where they have a theatre, I think they are struggling getting people back into the theatre again.
Right.
Maybe Edinburgh's in a bit of a bubble and it doesn't affect it. So I noticed that. Some places haven't been affected so much. Places like Norwich were really, really wonderful to me. Aberdeen was really nice to me. But then you go to like the Lake District and you find yourself in Ulverston or whatever, and it's there. It's like they're trying to pull people back in.
Right. Yeah.
And it's tough. And so what theatres are doing are they're just doing the sort of lowest common denominator. What's going to work? A tribute act will work. Queen, Elton John, rock and roll tribute, divas tribute, whatever. That will work. Magic act that's themed around signs, risky, alarm bells, that might not, that's what sort of that's what I'm seeing. People are playing it really safe at the moment. So that's why the Fringe, I see that trend to safety. Audiences going out, spending money, they want to see something, they just want to know they're going to be entertained by something good. So they want to see something safe, and the Fringe I think is less risky than it used to be. But that's just me. Maybe because I'm at a different level in the Fringe now, and I'm not seeing the grassroots Fringe stuff happening. Maybe it's just me. But I love seeing people take risks, and I don't care if it doesn't work or not. I think the risk taking is a massive part of development as an artist. So I think using those opportunities to take risks is hugely important.
Yeah, no, I think you're really right. It's and because it's so expensive as well to come and do a show at the Fringe, your accommodation, and then yes, there's a free Fringe, but still, it's not. You've got to have a substantial amount of money to come and put on a show. So it is restrictive if you're from a certain socio-economic background to come and put a show on. So I definitely noticed that. I'm always keen to go and see where's the weird stuff, where's the stuff with someone throwing menstrual blood around and screaming, in a white room. That's the stuff that I gravitate to. And there's been less and less of that. But I've certainly noticed on posters, this is a shift I've noticed over the last couple of years, is you now see on comedians' posters flags to their social media views, 250 million likes on whatever, or a video that's done really well. And that's something I've noticed where it's like you can't, it's not enough as a stand-up to just come and do a show. You've got to also be thinking about this content that you've got to put out all the time. You've got, it's just, and to what end? I always wonder the sort of numbers from people who are doing well on TikTok to the people who are watching that on TikTok. Are they going out to see these comedians? Because if you're a band, you make money off touring. But
there are bookers now that will not take an act on a tour unless they've got more than 250k followers on TikTok or whatever the platform is, right?
Wow.
And the reason for that is because they are that number of followers translates. So I've got a friend of mine, I probably shouldn't give any names, but he's on the Edinburgh circuit. He's been on the Edinburgh circuit for a while. He's not an out and out stand up. He's got like a variety edge to what he does, so that it sort of crosses over into different areas. But he can go to a comedy club in London and know that if there's just, let's say there's 100 seats, 20 or so seats will sell almost instantly just on the back of his following. And that's kind of true in every town or place he goes to. So wherever he goes, there's a fifth of the audience that are coming out just off of the back of his TikTok followers and the people that they bring along with them, right? So that's the power of this. It is really powerful. I can't get arsed with it, if I'm honest. The idea of playing to a screen just doesn't appeal to me at all. I like the live audience thing, but a lot of people who've got video-friendly acts, they're thriving and they're making a name for themselves. And it absolutely is translating into bums on seats. And bookers are seeing it. So generally speaking, another thing I have to say, I don't really want to, but the most important thing is that you're a good act, right? But the second, you've got to let people know you're a good act. So Foil Arms and Hog, there's a great example. Foil Arms and Hog, trio, comedy sketch act. We used to, when I was still doing my comedy sketch stuff with the Colour Ham, Foil Arms and Hog, myself and my two friends, we were always doing similar size venues. We were doing the Caves, they were doing so we were like 150 seater in the Caves. They were doing a similar size venue with Underbelly. they're now doing McEwen Hall, which is what, 1,000-seater, 1,200 maybe,
Yeah,
maybe
right.
700. I can't remember. It's almost 1,000, and they're packing it every night. And you know what the difference is? The difference is that they committed to doing every single Monday or whatever it was some kind of social media sketch, and they got really good at it, and they got big followings, and now they've had some viral sketches that have reached tens of millions of people, and that's translating into Bums on Seas. So it does work, you know. So, but it works. It only works when you decide to take it seriously and you turn it into a business, and you decide to do what needs to be done to make it work.
Off the back of this, I mean, I have tried to get into TikTok a bit more, because some of the young people that I work with, they go, oh, you know what's really big on TikTok? And I went, no. They went, the X-Files. And I went, is it? And they go, what? Yeah, get some videos edited together. So I've been trying to do that, but I totally hear you that it's just, I don't think I've got that capacity in my brain to, you know, engage with that. You know, because it's almost like, the satisfaction and enjoyment I get out of this process is speaking to people like yourselves, learning about how they approach things. I always learn something like what you've just said about social media when I chat to people, and then I know from feedback to people who write into the show and on social media comments that they get the same enjoyment out of it and go off. So that's what I get out of it, and I guess I always saw the social media as a sort of means to an end, because that was a thing with TikTok. I was like, well, great, I'll do that, but what I want is more listeners to the podcast. You know, I'm not interested in being a sort of TikToker. I don't want to be a TikToker, thank you. So, because it just seems to me so sort of transient. You know, I've got a friend who's a film critic, and they did a tweet about like Lindsay Lohan, and he looked how many people had engaged with it, and it was like 11 million people had seen this tweet, and it was like, and that's it. To what end? They're not like, they've not got any more work out of it. It's not, you know, you can't go to town on that. I was like, oh, it's me who did that Lindsay Lohan tweet. So it's like, I don't know. I don't, unless it kind of reverts back to this thing, what I'm doing now, you know, this process I want to go through now. I find it, I don't know, I feel like I'm getting a bit too long in the tooth for it, but...
I don't know, I think, like, you know, these trends on TikTok, I remember reading an article on the BBC, and it was a guy, written by a guy in a wheelchair, and I'm not sure what the reason was he was in the wheelchair, but he'd recently been experienced a spate of people shouting, Kenny! Like, being heckled, and Kenny being this very famous South Park character, wheelchair-bound character, very complex character, you know, like Kenny was, if you look at a very quick clip of a South Park episode, it looks like you're making fun of a disabled person, but it was really nuanced, you know, these guys, Parker, they knew what they're doing, you know, and they made this character, Kenny, into this very multi-layered character who communicated only with one word, of course, but got a lot of information across using that word, and always, you know, was a lot smarter than people assumed he was going to be, and he always ended up coming out on top in some sort. It was a really nuanced character, but what's happening now in this sort of that nuance only ever comes across when you watch the full 20-30 minute episode. If you take just a tiny little clip, 10 seconds, chuck it onto TikTok, and this is what had happened, it makes it look like you're doing something very one-dimensional and offensive to wheelchair. So this guy, he understood the nuances of the Kenny character from the South Park episodes, but we live in a world now where they're just taking a little clip out of context, which makes it look like someone's been made fun of because they're in a wheelchair, and they can only say one word, right? Anyway, I found that really quite interesting. That there's a lot of this going on TikTok there, where they take little clips of previous shows, and we've gone really off piece there with that. No idea. Just reel me back in if I'm gonna. But then they pull them into this TikTok world and take them out of context. That's the other thing I don't like about it. I'm about substance. I like stories that last longer than 10 seconds. You know, there's so much more I want to see.
The BBC put up a video the other day of some old archive film they found. It was around Halloween. It was called the Hexham Heads, and there were these kind of decapitated heads that were found on like a moorland or something, and it was like some spooky story, and video was like a BBC report from like 1967, and they're interviewing this woman about these Hexham heads, and it was only like a 2-minute clip, but all the comments were like, get to the point, Janet, you know, because she was just talking normally about these Hexham heads, and I was like, wow, if you're not like getting right to the point in like 5 seconds, then it's like, next, I'll just scroll on, you know. It's wild to me.
Totally, and I think that's the other thing now about live entertainment as well, that's definitely happening, and I have to say there is some benefits to it, because I remember looking at my Britain's Got Talent act. Sorry, there was a genuine segue coming up here. I'm not just trying to like, hey, I was on Britain's Got Talent, right? But the act I'd made was about 7 or 8 minutes long, this flaming cannonball act based on the harmonic pendulum. And I remember like taking it into a room with my mentor, Dusty, this old magician, very similar to Patrick Page, just this kind of slightly gruff, heart of gold, but kind of rough exterior, ex-military guy. And he's just very honest. I love this sort of brutal honesty, because it just gets you to the end point faster, I find. And he's like, no, it's rubbish, that's not good, need to do this. And basically by the end of it, we spent 2 days working in the theatre on this act, and we got it down from 8 minutes to like 5 minutes. And then we got to the theatre, and they managed to take another 30 seconds off of it. And you know what? It improved it.
Yeah.
It got better because of this cutting the fat away process and just trying to get to what is important. Let's find this really amazing 4 minutes worth of magic, rather than 8 minutes of okay magic with a decent finale. Just 4 minutes of really fast moving, never get bored sort of stuff. So there is benefit to it, but I think when you're reducing it down to 10 seconds, 6 seconds, oh my god, I just like that. I consider myself to be a bit more cultured than having my media digested in 6 to 10 seconds. This is like one of the things about the American election they're talking about is these Joe Rogan podcasts, and how like the likes of Musk and Trump were on this long form 90-minute whatever it was Joe Rogan podcast, and Kamala Harris was didn't want to do it for whatever reason, right? And they were all saying it's because her personality couldn't stretch to 90 minutes, and this was one of the things they were using against her on the campaign trail. So there is an interest in long form, more in-depth stuff too, but so this is the thing, I would be more inclined to put together a YouTube thing than a TikTok thing. That's probably because it's slightly more long form.
Yeah. Just before we get into that X-Files chat, do you have you ever experienced anything supernatural in real life? Are you open to supernatural encounters, or are you particularly interested in the paranormal at all?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really, I don't mind either way. I think certainly when I was younger, I certainly was, but these days I'm not a complete rationalist either. I kind of went through a phase of being completely everything's got an explanation, Mr. Physics, that was one. But these days, like, I'm just not bold enough or brave enough to say like everything's got an explanation, because I just don't think it does. I don't think we know everything. And like every time we peel back a new layer of physics, a new version of the world and the reality, we just realize how stupid we were 50 years ago. We thought 100 years ago we thought we had the world figured out. They had standard model of the universe, and Einstein comes along and says, oh no, actually the faster things get, the heavier they become. You're like, what? Speed has something to do with how big you are? And it's like it changes the whole world and the way of thinking of the universe, and it's not about smooth lines anymore. It's about quantized packets of energy, and it's like you just realize how smart people, how stupid they actually were. There's an argument for like Earth being at the center of the universe. The whole thing that Galileo was against. I mean, from the point of view from an obvious point of view, we're going around the sun, but there's a point of view that we're in the middle and everything else is around us. There's an argument to be made for that. It's just a different point of view, different reference frame. So you asked me, has anything happened to me? So one story I'll tell you is when I was staying down in Crewe, this lovely sort of It's near Birmingham, this sort of small town. And my mum's from farming stock, and her brother was she's Irish, but a lot of them had emigrated. He'd emigrated to England, and he had a farm. He was working on a farm. He was living in a farmhouse, and we were over there for a family trip. Me, my dad, my mum, my brother, my two sisters, and anyway, turned out there was we'd got like chicken pox or whatever. So rather than sleeping in the house, we're sleeping in the tent. My brother had some chicken pox and I didn't, so he was sleeping in the house. Right. My dad and I were in the tent in this farmyard, and he was inside, I think, having a whiskey with my uncle or whatnot. And I'm knackered. I'm going to go to bed. So I went out to the tent in the garden, started getting comfortable, and then just settling down for the night. And I heard, it felt like footsteps. I felt someone was walking around the tent. Right. Just pacing around it. So I froze and I was listening intently, petrified, because it was pitch black. We're in the middle of the country, there's no natural light. And then this thing walking around. And then it felt like I just paused for what felt like an hour, but probably like a few minutes. And I was just waiting. I couldn't hear anything. And I was like, maybe I've just imagined it. So I just started getting comfy in my sleeping bag again. And then just outside the tent, just where my head was, just nothing separating us more than a mere layer of canvas, there was this stamp noise, like someone just put their foot down really heavily right outside where my head was. And that was it. Every single part of me was on high alert. I froze and I didn't move until my dad came out of the house what felt like an hour later. God. And came to join me in the tent, and I was absolutely petrified. And then we heard this noise, the sound of felt like a wild animal screeching in the background. But yeah, that sort of was bolted onto my uncle, Uncle Tig, his name was. He was purveyor of all sorts of weird experiences used to happen to him, and he was telling us about, how he always walked through we would be working in a field, and that field might be like 7 or 8 fields over, and he'd be walking home and he'd hear over the hedge this field, like a stampede of cattle. And he said, there's no animals in that field. And he'd get to the hedge and look over it and nothing would be there. Or whenever one of his friends had passed away, one of his farming friends, he would be walking down the driveway to the farmyard, and he would call him the Black Man. There'd be a black man would walk past him up the driveway the opposite way, and he always knew. He would never he'd never look at the black man. He'd never give him eye contact. He would just keep his head down, but you could feel the presence of this black man walking past him. Whenever he saw this black man, he always knew that was an omen that one of his friends had passed away. So we would get this, and then we would be down there. Obviously, my brother and I would be like, "What?" And then we had these things. So it fed into this whole vibe of the supernatural being focused in on this farmhouse and Crewe, on the outskirts of Crewe, and we used to love those trips down there. So yeah, that's my experience.
So this is season 2, episode 15 of the X-Files Fresh Bones, directed by Rob Bowman, written by Howard Gordon. And when I asked you to do this one, I did it because there's obviously a voodoo / magic connection to this, but it is a very somber episode. So I felt kind of bad for making you watch it as a one-off. What we get to start with, the episode starts, we're in this suburban neighbourhood in autumn. A woman's in bed. She wakes up because she hears a baby crying. She asks her husband to go and check on the baby, but her husband's not in bed next to her. He's in the bathroom and he sounds a bit sick. He storms out of the bathroom, and we see he's a private in the army. He's got a green t-shirt on. He's got dog tags. He looks really ill. He's in the right state. He sits down to breakfast. The woman tells him, "You look ill, you need to go and get yourself off to the doctors." He then totally goes off the rails, shouts at her, tells us he just wants to sit there and eat his breakfast cereal. Then he looks down into his bowl of cornflakes, and his bowl of cornflakes have turned into a bowl full of maggots that are writhing around. He jumps up, storms out of the house again. He then gets in the car, speeds off, still very agitated in the car, and when he looks up at the rear view mirror, he sees that his own reflection of it's horrible. He's got bits of flesh falling off. He looks like a zombie or something, and he's concentrating so much on that he crashes headlong in the car into a tree. And the camera then pans around, and we see that on the tree is this strange circular symbol has been painted on. So I mean, anything with like kids crying in it, I can't stand that. So it's already quite a high intensity opening. Would you say that you're more in the Scully camp than the Mulder camp, or you see yourself somewhere in the middle in terms of skeptic and believer?
I'm a magician scientist. I've got one foot in both camps. I'm more than happy to borrow from the world of the supernatural and move it into the world of realism. Like I love this stuff. I love the emotional impact that it has on people. I think like I'm happy to be a bit of Mulder and a bit of Scully. I'm both magician scientist. That's what I am. So maybe that's why the X-Files appealed to me so much. I love the rationalism. I love the skepticism. I love the mystery element, and I love the tease. There's so much tease in the X-Files, isn't there? The tease is almost more fun than the episodes that give it all away. The tease of are they real? You're left with more questions at the end than at the start, and that kind of mystery box style of writing and how that fed into shows like Lost. I would say the people who wrote Lost, it was J.J. Abrams, wasn't it? I think he must have loved the X-Files growing up because of the whole leave more questions at the end than you do at the start, and every time you open the box is another. It's like that Matryoshka, that Russian doll kind of storytelling.
Oh yeah.
As soon as you open up one doll, there's another doll inside. You're like, oh, shit, there's another one. You never actually get to the end.
I mean, I say it's somber, but there are some nice little bits in this episode. One thing which really stood out is this bit where Scully catches her hand on a thorn bush that's been attached to a car steering wheel. So she's got this little cut on her hand, and she's like, it's upsetting her all through the episode. Then towards the end of the episode, she's in the car at this cemetery, looks at her hand, and a man comes out of her hand and like squeezes straight out. Really like out there scene, and then this man starts strangling her in the car. We get a great ending to the episode as well, and fans of the film The Vanishing will particularly enjoy that ending. And just to say as well, I really like Mulder's character in this episode. There's a bit where him and Scully take this kid, Chester, who they find in the camp. They take him, they find him at a local graveyard, digging up one of the graves. And they're in this diner, Scully and Mulder and the kid. And you get a real sense that Mulder's just really warm sometimes to people. He's very good with people, and he's very like the way he smiles and interacts with this young boy, as opposed to how Scully's quite sort of standoffish and kind of quite cold a lot of the time. You can see why. I mean, we sort of talk a lot about Mulder, how Mulder could ever hold down a job in the FBI because he's spooky, in inverted commas. And the episodes which are really great are the ones where you see Mulder being a detective and being an FBI agent and not just standing around prophesizing about aliens. And this is the one where you can see, he's actually does go about things in an interesting way, in a warm way, in a way which would make people open up to him. So I really liked that aspect to the character coming out. Were you watching it growing up then, or did you come to it a bit later? Because you mentioned Voyager and TNG, but were you like early 90s watching it when it first came out?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we watched it religiously, if that's the right word to use. Right. I loved it. Whenever it was on, we would always have like family moments where we'd watch certain shows. And I think I talked to you about, like, I loved watching magic shows. Loved whenever Paul Daniels was on, we watched that.
Yeah.
X-Files was one of those shows that I would definitely be in charge of the remote control. I would definitely be the one moving us towards the X-Files as a family, and because it fascinated me, all of that stuff, Bermuda Triangle, any sort of mystery, the Yeti, the abominable snow. There's probably episodes of aliens.
Yeah.
All that stuff was just so high up my agenda. Intrigue, interest, and all of those kind of things. So yeah, we would watch them all. If I had it my way, we weren't able to sort of binge watch back then, but there was definitely this religious, right, X-Files. And if I wasn't allowed to watch, if someone else was watching something, I'd be so upset.
Yeah.
You know, because that would be it. You couldn't watch it again. If you didn't watch it, that was it. You're stuffed. You can't watch it again.
Were there
missed out.
were there any particular episodes that you remember? When we were texting, you mentioned a couple, and I was like, "Oh, they're interesting choices." Because most people say, "Oh, I remember watching the episode Home about the inbred family," or they remember Tombs. But your choices were like, "Well, that's interesting."
So the ones that I said to you, there was two that sprung to mind, and one was, I think it's this episode where they kind of find like the second coming. They find a child, which is they're hinting at is Jesus, like the Jesus incarnate or whatever, you know. And this child, obviously he has the potential to save the world, right? That's the idea. Right. And there's a group of kind of, let's call them religious zealots. They're trying to look after this kid, but then on the other hand, there's all these kind of like, let's just say devil representatives of the devil trying to kill this kid, you know, like, because they don't want this second come. So there's like this sort of battle between good and evil, let's just say, being fought in the suburbs of America, in the American heartland, the Bible Belt, and Mulder and Scully somehow get sort of caught up in it. And Scully, of course, with her relaxed Catholicism, her crucifix that she wore around her neck, and every now and again was brought up in every episode. She was sort of tasked with one episode for protecting this child, and her faith was challenged, and she had to do something that was maybe uncharacteristically out of her box. She had to become the believer for an episode and protect this child, and you know, and I loved that element of it, like the rational. This is all bullshit sort of Scully kind of vibe, but suddenly now she was taking the Mulder role. I think those were the episodes that I really liked. I think that's probably the other episode I talked about was one that Mulder had they'd found this guy in a toilet, and basically looked like he'd been straining too hard and had an aneurysm and died. But Mulder was like, it's nothing, let's move on. But Scully was like, no, there's something else going on here. I don't know what it is, but and I always remember that too. So whenever Scully was like, no, there's something weird happening here, and she wasn't the dismissive one, those are the episodes where I was like, my ears pricked.
Yeah, those are the really, really good ones, you're right, because it's like a swap between the two about who's the believer or not. And if there's something medical, or if there's a virus, then because Scully's a medical doctor, she's straight in there. And there's episodes like Ice, which is like The Thing, or there's one set in a volcano, and just
was there one where there was a tree cut down in like north of Canada, and there was like these insects that were frozen inside the tree.
Yeah, Darkness Falls.
And then they started swarming.
Yeah.
Oh, that was it just came to mind there. I remember that one, and they were trying to stop the spread of these little because what did they do? They swarmed and they ate people alive or something. I can't remember.
Yeah, that's right. Cocooned them. Yeah, I mean that's another one where she's brought her. She's for some reason she just wheels out a microscope at some point. Like she just brought it with her, but it's great. Yeah, she's straight on it with that, and those are the ones that are really scary to me, because it's like, oh, this could, could it actually?
It was great, because like they were trying to burn down acres of forest at the end to try and stop the spread of it. But like when they had that realization that, oh shit, these things are actually everywhere right now. They're just not swarming. They're actually, when she saw them, they're already on us. They're already on all the objects. They're already here. They're already there. And you're like, oh my God, they're already everywhere. The death is just waiting for darkness.
Yes.
When the light goes out, oh my God, yeah, that was brilliant, that episode. It's just all coming back to me now. The hairs on the back of my neck.
I'm gonna say that's incredible, like memory you've got there, Kevin, because it's I some of them I don't I lose go out of my brain, but
the great things, science fiction things, always, you know, the ones that just live long in your memory. Like when I'm fantasy as well, like Lord of the Rings. You know, when you're watching something that's really well crafted and written, and all the problems have been solved, and you're never like, oh, but what about? Oh yeah, they've done that. Oh, but what? And as soon as you have a question, they've answered it for you. The characters are just behaving in the way they're meant to. That for me is it's such a delight. And over time, you know, with X-Files, you know, you can see Mulder, and they've got really great defined characters, right? You know, oh, there's a skeptic, there's the believer, and this one's open to this one's open to that. And they develop, and over time you just get to know these two characters better and better and better. And then, so when Scully starts believing in something, you're like, oh my God, this must really be this must really be worth investing in if she's believing in it. I think that's probably fed into my world view, or maybe it was already always there, and those were the ones that it's triggered, but I've only ever been able to rationalize it in the last 45 minutes talking to you.
I'm glad that this has helped you through on that part of your journey, Kevin. Thank you.
Okay. You know, actually, you just made me think there. What was the name of their boss again? What was the name of the
Skinner.
Skinner. And you remember how Skinner, like, he went on to be the voice of the narrator for The Masked Magician?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Do you remember? So Skinner, whenever, you know, the Masked Magician, the big massive controversy in the magic world, this Masked Magician, who's the man? You know, it took years for them to work out who it was, right? No one knew who it was. Then there was a massive expose on how they found out who the Masked Magician was. It's hilarious, right? You know, first world problems. Right? But Skinner was this sort of sleazy voiceover guy, and then he takes her he lies her down flat on the table and gets his sword out. I wonder what he's going to do with his sword. You know, it's all this sort of sleazy internal monologue of what a magic trick is about. And so I always remember going, why is Skinner narrating magic tricks? You know, it was you should watch some of them back, because I think it's a nice twist.
Thank you so much for reminding me of that, because I totally forgot he'd done that. And just before we go, Kevin, are you gonna is this kicked off a need for you to rewatch the entirety of the X-Files again, do you think? You've not got time, have you? You're so busy.
I wish I could. You know, I very rarely watch television these days. It's like it's a pleasure and a privilege when I do get the chance. And the things that I am watching, it's usually, I think I'm watching is it the Young-Sang Creature on Netflix at the moment, which is like a horror sci-fi thing about some sort of, I guess, like little what do you call it? A little creature that goes inside of you and turns you into a monster.
Like
and
a parasite.
It's based in Korea. Yeah, Parasite. That was the word I'm after. Nice. It's okay. It's like, it's very sort of good guy, bad guy storytelling, which I actually miss these days. Sometimes I get a bit bored of the sort of wicked, oh look, it's a misunderstood baddie, she's actually good underneath all of the makeup, blah blah blah. Right. Like, I always like, sometimes I like going back to it. They're the good guys, they're the bad guys. Right, and they're just intrinsically bad, and they're just intrinsically good. And the good character, there's always a bit of like shades of grey in the good side, of course, but the bad ones are always bad, right? Yeah, and some days I just like that. Just like a bit simplistic. Don't want to have to think about it too much. So,
Believe Me is written and edited by me, Chris Boyd, with production support from Steve Marshall. The music is by Johnny Boyle, and our logo is by Russ Brown. If you like the show, please do hit subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll see you out there next time.